I can't see! Going on your
There is a white 1970 Dodge Challenger that is, right now, somewhere in the world. It has chassis-mounted camera brackets underneath it. It has window frames welded to the tops of both door openings, a modification that no production Challenger ever left the factory with. Its radio is a hollow plastic prop that does not function. Its front seats have been chopped and reupholstered to give camera operators better sightlines into the cabin. And every panel on its flanks carries the dents, creases, and paint streaks of a chase sequence that took 6 weeks to film at speeds touching 100 miles per hour in the hills above Buellton, California. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and now, lights, camera, action. To understand what the Challenger and Death Proof meant to Quentin Tarantino, you have to understand what it meant to him before a single frame of the movie was shot. The girl's car in Death Proof is a direct reference to Vanishing Point, the 1971 existentialist road movie. It's the same year, make, model, and color as the one protagonist Kowalski drove across the desert. Vanishing Point is at its core the story of a man named Kowalski, a car delivery driver who takes a bet to deliver a white 1970 Dodge Challenger RT 440 Magnum from Denver to San Francisco in under 15 hours, setting off a multi-state police chase that becomes something closer to a philosophical statement about freedom, disillusion, and the end of the American counterculture, and drives it into a police roadblock made of bulldozers at full speed. The car is the character. The white is not coincidental. It was chosen so the Challenger would stand out against the desert, but it became something more, a symbol of velocity and inevitability that embedded itself into the DNA of American car cinema. Tarantino didn't just reference Vanishing Point visually, the tribute is text, not subtext. It's mentioned directly in dialogue between the characters Kim and Zoe, with Zoe saying, "To me, there's no point in being in America unless you can drive a Detroit muscle car. And I want to drive a Dodge Challenger." He just puts it right there in the conversation and dares you to follow the breadcrumbs.
Hey, good looking. Be back to pick you up later.
What the car actually was here is the first layer of the deception, and it's a good one. The Death Proof Challenger is dressed on screen as a 1970 model, a ringer for the Vanishing Point hero car, but the fender tag decodes it as a 1971. The production crew built the cosmetic illusion carefully. Correct hood badges, correct power bulge, correct Raleigh wheels and Goodyear tires. From the outside, in motion, on film it reads exactly as intended. But there is one modification on this car that gives it away to anyone who knows what they are looking at, and it matters enormously to the story of what this car was built to do. No production Challenger in 1970 or 71 or any other year came from the factory with window frames on its doors. The Challenger was a hardtop, frameless glass like every other performance coupe of that era. There was nothing to grab onto. The production team welded frames into the tops of the doors themselves. The reason is documented and specific. A strap was secured on the inside of the cabin running through those welded frames, and Zoe Bell would hold the other end with her bare hands while riding the hood. The structural modification that makes this car visually wrong for any production Challenger was an engineering solution to the problem of keeping a human being alive on the outside of the vehicle at high speed. Under the hood, where the script called for a 440 Magnum, a 383 cubic inch V8 sits in its place, the car's original engine paired to an automatic transmission. The production dressed the exterior with 440 Magnum hood badges to sell the Vanishing Point tribute, while the mechanical reality beneath was rather more modest. The fake plastic radio fitted inside the cabin would later cause a seller to note dryly, "A good example of how Hollywood is all make-believe." Now, a quick clarification because this matters. When we say Zoe Bell's Challenger, we mean the Challenger her character rides in Death Proof. Belle plays a version of herself in the film, a stunt woman visiting friends in Tennessee who spots a Challenger for sale in the classifieds, and essentially hijacks a test drive so she can play a game she calls Ship's Mast on the Hood. The studio owned the cars. Back-to-Back Films was the production company. Zoe Bell owned nothing and had no say over what happened to the fleet after filming wrapped. What she did own was the stunt itself, and that is what makes this car matter. You cannot talk about this Challenger without talking about what was done with it, because the stunt sequence that makes Death Proof the movie it was built entirely around a woman on the outside of this vehicle at triple-digit speeds with nothing between her and the asphalt but 2 leather belts looped through those welded door frames, and her own grip strength. Bell spends the majority of the chase on the hood, holding on while Kim drives and stuntman's Mike Black 1969 Charger rams them repeatedly from behind and alongside. The camera whips around, showing the ground flying beneath her as she grips the radiator cover for dear life. This is not a stunt double for Zoe Bell. Zoe Bell is the stunt double. She's also the lead actress in the film, playing herself, and she performed every single moment of what you see on screen. When Tarantino offered to use a second performer for the shots where Bell's face wasn't visible, she refused. If someone else were performing the stunt, she said, those were the stunts she would want to do herself. The chase sequences were filmed at up to 80 and at times 100 miles per hour. The sequence took 6 weeks to shoot. The Tennessee backroads seen on screen were actually the roads around Buellton, Los Olivos, and Lompoc in Central California. Tarantino's production team needed the right landscape and the right road conditions. Bell herself recalled the temperature swings across those 6 weeks. There were times when it was so hot her stomach started burning on the engine, and at times when it was so cold that she thought she'd have to get Rosario Dawson to push her sweater through the car window from inside. One of the most celebrated moments in the sequence, a near miss where the speeding Challenger and Charger flip an oncoming truck, put 4 veteran stunt performers in the same frame simultaneously: Terry Leonard, Buddy Joe Hooker, Tracy Keene Dashnaw, and Zoe Bell. Tarantino later called it one of the greatest things he had ever put on film. He was not wrong. The car itself had to maintain a specific speed throughout these collisions. Too slow and Bell's grip would be compromised during the impacts. Too fast and the forces involved in being rammed by a full-size Charger would throw her completely clear. There was a window, a specific narrow band of velocity, within which the stunt was survivable. They filmed in that window repeatedly for 6 weeks. The welded window frames made it possible, and every dent and crease on the car's body is a record of that fact. The fleet and the bill of sale 6 Challengers were used to film Death Proof. Not 1, 6. And after filming wrapped in early 2007, before the movie had even been released to audiences, the production company Back-to-Back Films moved to dispose of the fleet. A bill of sale from January 25, 2007 tells the story. In brief, Back-to-Back Films sold a collection of death-proof vehicles in as-is condition, including 3 Challengers in varying states of damage, listed by condition, some with engines and some without, to a private buyer in California, with a hard deadline to remove everything from the Buellton production location by January 30th. It's signed by the production's transportation coordinator. This is the moment the cars left the production and entered private hands, on paper with a deadline and with no ceremony whatsoever. The 3 Challengers in that sale were damaged, stripped, or incomplete. The 2 that survived as drivable complete cars took a different route. Of those, the one that matters most to the end of this story is the car with a VIN ending in 8670. That one made it to Australia. The Australian garage find, the most documented of the surviving complete cars, has a story that is almost too good to be true, and is confirmed across multiple sources. After filming completed, but before Death Proof was released in April 2007, a private buyer imported one of the Challengers sight unseen from the production. When it arrived in Australia, he was disappointed. The car was battered, dented, scratched, with welded door frames and a hollow plastic radio and camera brackets bolted to the underside. He sold it to a friend who planned to restore it, presumably to something resembling a real car. Then another friend saw a trailer for the movie. The realization landed like a roundhouse. The car sitting in someone's garage in Australia was Zoe Bell's Challenger. It was the car from the film. It was, in fact, one of the only 2 surviving complete running examples of the 6-car fleet. At that point, the decision was made to leave it exactly as it was. It sat in an as-filmed condition. The garage bracket still bolted underneath, the window frame still welded into the doors, the fake radio still in the dash, the production scratches and side creases intact until it was acquired by Movie Cars Central, a European-based private collection of famous film vehicles, whose team found it while in Australia working on an entirely unrelated Mad Max Interceptor restoration. Sometimes this is exactly how automotive film history gets preserved, accidentally, by people who were there for something else entirely. In August 2017, Movie Cars Central listed this Challenger on eBay. The car still carried 38,965 miles on the odometer. Its 383 Magnum V8 ran well. The gearbox shifted smoothly. The electrical system had been sorted. New exhaust and a new fuel tank had been fitted. Every production modification, the door frames, the camera mounts, the seat chops, the trunk support that allowed one rear wheel to be locked for stunt work was still in place. The seller noted that the other surviving complete Challenger, then in England, had recently sold for $80,000. The listing opened at a low bid and climbed. A previous auction in 2016 had sold the car for $32,500. By the time the 2017 auction closed, it sold for approximately $30,000. Now we're putting this directly to you. This is a car with welded door frames that no Challenger ever had from the factory. It has a fake radio and chopped seats and camera brackets under the floor. Its paint has been deliberately scratched and its body dented for camera effect. It cannot be restored to original condition because it was never in original condition. It was purpose-built for a film. It runs, it drives, and it carries 6 weeks of Zoe Bell on a hood at 100 miles an hour in every panel. Would you have paid $30,000 for it? Drop your answer in the comments below. Subscribe to Cinebuster right now if you haven't yet. This is the channel that finds the paper trails, reads the 15-year-old forums, and follows the cars overseas and back. Hit that button. The picture across the surviving fleet is scattered and honest. One of the Challengers ended up in Finland. The Australian car with a VIN ending in 70, the one that became the garage find, the one that sold for a little north of 30 grand on eBay, passed through Movie Cars Central and found a new owner in 2017. A third, the most visibly battle-scarred example, appeared in the 2024 Chrysler Nationals in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Its current owner having bought it almost by chance and now driving it to car shows. The damaged shells listed in the 2007 bill of sale were removed from Buellton by their buyer within days of the sale, and have not appeared in any verified public records since. None of these surviving cars are currently on public display in any verified museum or permanent exhibition. 6 Challengers went in, 2 came out as complete running vehicles. The rest exist in photographs, forum threads, and the memories of people who were on set, and in the dents and welds of the ones that made it. Vanishing Point ended with a white Challenger driving into a wall of bulldozers and Kowalski's face lighting up just before impact. Death Proof ended with the woman turning the tables, hunting down stuntman Mike, flipping his car, dragging him from the wreckage and beating him to death in a ditch on the side of a California road dressed as Tennessee. The difference between the two films is the difference between mythology and something rawer than that. Tarantino understood that distinction completely. He cast the person who actually does this for a living, told her she could perform every stunt herself, and pointed a camera at her. The Challenger that made it possible is somewhere in the world right now, dented, welded, and entirely true.